All right, today we're going to talk about the mini super crane problems. Now, I'm experiencing a problem with the mini super crane. Unfortunately, the kids are devastated right now. So hopefully we can get this fixed. So here's what's going on. Everything seems to be responding. The dollar bill collector, the coin collector, the LED lights, everything. The only problem is the game will not start and the display screen is black. Now, I had purchased this crane machine from a store called candymachines.com. Spoke to a guy named Kevin. He's a really good guy. He does some really great videos on this crane machine. He can walk you through the processes of how to set up the dollar bill collector, how to program it, how many trinkets it'll fit inside. Does some really good YouTube videos. So I spoke to him and we came to the conclusion that it might be the PCB board, the motherboard. Now, looking at the diagram, I kind of think that it's the MCU because everything on the PCB board seems to be functioning. The lights, the LEDs, the coin collector, it all seems to be functioning. Now, I did do a voltage test on the power pack that's back here. So now on this power pack that's back here, you should be getting 12 and 24 volts, which I am getting. Checked all the wiring, nothing seems to be loose. There's no blown capacitors, none of them are popped, none of them are bulging. There's nothing burned on any of the boards. There's no burning smell coming from this thing at all. It just will not start. One day we came down here, my daughter put a quarter in, it made a funny noise, it said, and that was it. Before we even knew what was happening, the game didn't start and we realized that the screen was black, and that was the end of that. So we have a new PCB board, the motherboard. We're gonna put that in today and we'll see if that takes care of the problem. Now, I just want to mention one thing. When you're working with circuits like this, you want to ground yourself, because if you're not grounded, you could actually cause an electrostatic shock to the board, and you could actually burn the board out, the actual components that are within the board, if you're not grounded, just by you touching this with your skin, if you rubbed up against carpet or something before you start to do work like that. So it's always a good thing when you're going to work with PCB boards that you're going to want to ground yourself to the unit, the cabinet itself. That way you're not giving off an electric static shock and blowing out the new board. So it seems like it's going to be a pretty simple task. You have yourself two cables. One is J1, the other one is J2. We're just going to disconnect these two cables, and then there are 4 screws. This is the actual motherboard. The MCU is right here. This MCU actually pulls off. I'm not sure if he sent me the MCU. I haven't opened up the box yet, but we'll find that out. So once you get these jumpers off, they're just these little clamps. You just pop them up this way, and then they just pull right out. So then you have 4 screws in the corners. You take those off, the whole board just comes right up. So there is one thing I did forget to mention beside the grounding fact. Always when you're working on electrical circuits, make sure the power is off. I cannot stress that enough. All right, so we got the new board in. There was one thing that I did notice about the new board from the old board, is that on the old board, if you look at the old board here, all of the chips on the board, their information has been scratched out. And the new board that he sent me, the chips have all their labeling on there. Now, I'm not sure if maybe they did that because they didn't want, the only thing I could think of is maybe they didn't want people to copy their design or something. I don't know, but maybe if you know, send me a comment in the link below. So we got it all hooked up, wires are all in. I'm gonna unground myself, we'll power this thing back up and see if it works. And we have nothing. It is still not working. That is a big disappointment right there. Well, looks like we'll be back on the phone call with Kevin. Okay, so what I did was, now after I put the motherboard in and started it up, and it was another defeat, and I was a little upset about that. But so those of you who are not familiar with the channel and my technical background, I do electrical work for a high-rise building in downtown Chicago. I am a building engineer, and so I have extensive knowledge on electrical and technical troubleshooting and stuff like that. So what I started to think is what could be causing the CPU not to operate properly? Could it be a bad connection, a bad ground? So I checked all the connections, the grounds, everything was okay. So what I did is in the technical world, you start offloading your components that go to the CPU board. So I tried the dollar bill collector first. That didn't work, CPU didn't start. So then I thought, what else is connected to the CPU? It would be the keyboard. So I offloaded the keyboard and boom, there it is. It has started up and the CPU is back to life. Now I'm going to take the new CPU that Kevin sent me, take that out, and then I'm going to put the old CPU back in and see if there has been damage done to the old CPU board by the keyboard. Apparently the keyboard must be shorting out the CPU. And it's weird because, I mean, there's nothing on here. I mean, there's no damage on this thing at all. There's nothing burned. It's just something in the keyboard is hosing the CPU. And actually it would be hosing the MCU, because I believe this goes, well, no, it does go to the CPU to the MCU. But we'll get the old keyboard back, I mean the old CPU back in, and let's see if it fires up. Okay, we got the old CPU back in place. We're gonna leave the keyboard disconnected and we're gonna fire it up and let's see if this thing works. Voila, there it is. It's alive. So it seems that if you have this problem and you have a mini super crane and your display goes out, the problem is going to be the keyboard. The keyboard actually gives commands to the MCU, now that I've looked at the booklet, and it seems to hose the MCU, preventing the CPU from starting up correctly. So like I said, I bought this from candymachines.com. Kevin was really nice to send me out another CPU board. I'm going to be so nice to send him back the one that he sent me, and hopefully he can get me another keyboard sent out right away, and we'll get this thing going again, because obviously I did not want to reprogram this whole thing over again with the claw drop and all that. I mean, there's like a whole process to reprogram how you operate the claw and all that, and I did not want to go through that. So I am so happy that it is just the keyboard. And then, just for craps and giggles, let me get a quarter and let's see if this thing actually works. All right, it's all back together. We got the dollar bill collector hooked back up. We got the coin collector back in. We have the old MCU and CPU board back in. The newer one is right there. I'm going to ship that back to Kevin at candymachines.com. And with the exception of the keyboard is not in, because that is hosing the MCU and the CPU. So we're going to send the the new CPU and the old keyboard back to Kevin, and have him hopefully ship us out a new keyboard. So let's see if this thing will work without the keyboard. Ah, there we go. Awesome. The kids are gonna be happy. So if you have a mini super crane and you have a display out problem, shoot for the keyboard, because it seems like the keyboard, when it goes out, it will hose the CPU and the MCU, preventing the game and the display from lighting up. And thanks for watching, guys.